Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation. This week, we have a clip from virtual TinTech, because it didn't happen because of the rail strike. Thank you. Thank you, unions. And we've also got some news and something to make you laugh. How are you doing, Ben? You okay?
I'm good. I had a very busy week. I know what your world is like now, being involved in setting up an event, and I don't know how you do it. I'm never doing it again.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I don't know if I'll ever do it again either. But,
let's do something else.
Do something easier. Yes. Okay, let's crack on. Yeah, we've got a bell. So let's start with the news. So this is a great piece, Ben, about InsurTech. Brutal tech rout. Good headline there in the Financial Times. What's this one about?
Well, we've touched on this before. It's been mentioned a few times by the FT and others actually, but the whole fintech area is down. But now this has turned into something much worse, existential, I suspect, for some of the businesses that are in this article. So what it's saying is that fintech investment is down substantially, largely because of the world sort of situation in terms of investment and concerns about where value is going to be going forward. And the article points at some obvious candidates that we already knew had some troubles, which were Lemonade, Root, and Hippo, all vaunted back in the day. Lemonade was trading at something like 100 times sales value or sales revenue, whereas a Chubb or Travelers were trading at 1 to 2 times sales revenue. So I would start to question that a bit on a brand subject alone, let alone what they were actually doing. But anyway, they've been making losses. Those three companies have lost over $1 billion in the last year on claims losses mainly. Lemonade's down 90%, Root's 90% down on its share price, and Hippo 85%. Chief Executive Lemonade says, who cares about the share price? It's a short-term issue. This is a long-term play. Of course, he would say that, wouldn't he? But when you look at the fundamentals, the technical term is screwed, I would say, probably, from what this article is saying. And the question now really, which does come up for these businesses, is where they're going to get the cash from. So the people who are in the know, the investors, are saying, well, there isn't this cash available. So, and they burn through it so fast that they're going to struggle. So that's the next milestone, I think, that we're going to see. What I think is interesting, really, though, about this, and this article says it, is that actually it starts focusing people on what really does work in an insurance business. And that is essentially a diverse book of business. So Lemonade, being kind of homeowners type stuff, was hit very hard by the Texas floods and other things that happened in Texas, and so their claims book was smashed. They haven't got the diversity then, or the size or the scale of the book. So the point about data comes through really, which is the bigger your book, the more you understand what you've got, what's rubbish and what's good and what isn't in an insurance business. So it's all about experience, data, understanding and knowledge. And the big businesses have that in spades, even if they're a bit inefficient, as we know. So it drives you to really think about data that we look at, which is a move to scale competition, which is about lots of insurers now want to grow and they want to build their brands and they want to be the biggest. They want to be, lots of people say to us, we want to be top 10, we want to be top 5, we've got to get up there. But there's a sense of this next few years of a real competitive push, in the market. And then you then think, well, where does that leave some of the challenges in the London market, the Mosaics and people like that? Well, they've also got to move pretty fast too. They are, but they've got to move pretty fast too. So wider picture is massive amounts of competition in the insurance market now. I think it's a good thing generally to have that. I think it will businesses that have been found out will fail and fall by the wayside. It's always the way.
Yeah.
The global economy isn't going to be good for them, and there isn't the cash to keep them investing. So they'll go, and we'll be left with fewer players, I think, and bigger players, generally speaking. But it is interesting. Someone described it for these businesses. They're in the early stage startups of an insurer is the valley of death. You've got everything lined up against you.
It is, and do you see it playing out? I mean, when we ran the conference on Tuesday, the amount of discussion about attracting and retaining talent, for as these businesses evolve and become more digital, the skills and capabilities, there's a massive shortage, as we've talked about before. But it's those organizations that have that vision and that scale that you've just been talking about that will be able to fulfill what strategically their ambitions. So, and your point about the challenger brands is they really quickly become non-challengers. They become part of the establishment a lot quicker than they would have done, 15 years ago. So they don't stay fresh. So that immediate, it's like a football team when they get a new manager, they get that bounce effect, but it doesn't last. That's not a strategic play. That's just one of the offshoots of that.
I mean,
move.
If you go down to the roots of insurance, you always have to sell insurance. People don't get up in the morning to buy it, all that sort of thing. It's a grudge purchase. I think that's part of it, because you've got really a business that in essence it's a necessary purchase. It's not something that you desire or choose, and therefore it's not very sexy. So you start with that at the beginning of the fundamental point, and then I think you've got to think about, well, what is success about in insurance at the other end? And it is a long-term strategy. It's a sensible, disciplined strategy, all those words that we hear all the time. And the trouble with that is that, I suppose, in talent terms, you don't have these very sexy, quick startups, as that people can stay in them. That you get maybe in the design industry or the media. You've got to scale up quite quickly. So the technology, in a way, should help you to scale up quickly and build. But you've still got to build your books of business. And if I was a young person, I don't think I'd be going into these startups, because I don't think you'd learn very much, and you probably wouldn't be there for very long. It's probably the case that it is a bit boring, and it's steady. But that's how insurance needs to be, because it doesn't work when you try and throw bits of technology at it. It's got to be about fundamentals, really. Because it's such a fundamental business, isn't it? Really, it's so tied into what happens in business in general. It's not just buying a handbag or a new gadget, really.
Yeah. No. Good. Okay. Well, we shall watch this space. Right. As promised, Ben, I've got something to cheer us up after a week of strikes and non-events and all the rest of it. So put yourself on mute. This last 1 minute, I found it absolutely hilarious. So let's see what your reaction is.
Saw this on TikTok. Hey Siri. Change my nickname.
Okay. What would you like me to call you? You would like me to call you.
No.
Okay, I'll keep calling you Aaron.
Thank you.
I just found that so
brilliant.
funny. I just thought, oh my god. Yeah, I'm sure we won't be able to put that on YouTube because they'll go, oh, you can't use that. But if you're watching on demand, you can replay that many times.
Very good.
That is very funny.
That's cheered me up.
Right, we'll come back to. Are we going to carry on the funny stuff with?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's look at this Instagram account that you came across. The Hard Market.
The
Brilliant.
hard market. So the hard market is going to be covered by the insurer. I think they've said that it's an interesting platform where it is on Instagram. So the hard market is really follows in a rich history tradition of the market of slightly rebellious, countercultural message platforms. Used to happen on other platforms, but this happens to be Instagram. It's basically sort of the insider view of the business. It happens in other markets. There's one called Thank God It's Friday, which is a legal one, which has been very controversial because some of the managing partners really hated it because it basically took the piss out of their businesses from here. This is doing the same thing. So it's a long tradition. It's not unusual, but the hard market has about 35,000 followers, whatever that means on Instagram. We don't quite know. But anyway, let's just say a lot of people do follow it. And it is funny. And it's, I guess it's a slightly more irreverent version of what we do, which is why it caught my eye. And it's also, though, I think a really interesting take on what's going on in the business at any given time. There's clearly a lot of brokers here on this one, global, I think, and they're really talking about how they place risks and the ups and downs of that whole process, which is both, funny. It's presented a lot of it's very kind of witty and funny, and it's very visual because they're using kind of video, which is Instagram's thing, and it's quite creative. So I'd say if people are interested, just sign up and get onto it because it just initially it's a little bit hard to get into because if you're in the industry, the lingo shows just how kind of in you have to be. But this one here is about the upcoming renewals in a hard market. Just what it's doing to people. And so on. So it's just funny, some of it, and some of it's highly irreverent. And I'm going to follow it because I just think it's a nice different angle and a different take. And it's healthy to have this in a business. Actually, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And I just should have said the people behind it are anonymous. Of course, they don't want to be known. And I think that's probably right because I think there was one called Lloyd's Lifts, which used to be one that we followed, which was very funny in the London market. But that got, I think that got done in basically because whoever it was found out about it, and I think Lloyd's had a go at it and it shut down because they found out who was running it. So interesting to see how long this lasts. But yeah, it's quite good. It's quite funny.
Yeah, it is good. It does give you that kind of sentiment of where people are at, especially this one. So I'm going to follow that as well.
I mean, it is very, very funny, and the comments below are funny, and there's some great ones about the London market that if you get getting an underwriter in a good mood or after he's had a long lunch, just stamping thousands of risks off in the room. It's brilliant. It's really good. Yeah. Anyway, I definitely people should have a look at that, the hard market. And the insurer's doing an article on it, I think, about what it is. So we've probably stolen their thunder by doing this.
Yeah. Well,
Who cares?
Who cares? It's Friday.
It's Friday.
Right. So, as mentioned at the top of the show, we had to run Tintech as a virtual event on Tuesday. And we've pushed the real world event into October, which was quite painful and quite costly. But that's a different story. But what it does mean is that we can show you a clip from the London Market modernisation session. You can watch the whole thing. It's on the website. You don't have to pay for it. You just download the sessions you want to watch. But I've clipped this up into the Q&A section, so you can go back and listen to what Bob had to say in the update, and he was pretty frank about the timelines, which is refreshing. But in this clip, Paul Willoughby is kind of fielding questions that have been posted in the pre-event survey, and Bob and Toby Ducker from Axis are replying. So let's play the clip, and then we'll come back and give some thoughts.
How do we incentivize the brokers to provide us with the data without turning them into glorified entry technicians? Because that is a real threat, isn't it?
I mean, I think it's important to remember that a lot of brokers and cover holders are actually building this into their business model right now. We talk to cover holders all the time who are tech-led, data-first, not interested, frankly, in having the sort of people that historically might have been the case. So let's not ignore the fact that there's big parts of the market that are already moving on this as well. And for me, it's about working smart. So data can come from many places, and I think the retail industry outsources a lot of their data capture to the end client, for example, and our industry has a similar opportunity to do some of that. So push some of the data that needs to be fed in right down towards the client, but also augmentation. I mean, there's great things you can do by bringing in data from third-party sources these days, and so on. So really, rather than just trying to replicate what we've done before, we need to think smart about how we could do things differently in the future with some of the tools and techniques that are now available to us that maybe weren't before.
Yeah, I think it's really fair point. And on the theme of data, Bob, I'm really interested in getting some deeper perspective of the CDR. So I think the work to date on the CDR has been absolutely great. I love simplification. I love that we're bringing the number of fields down. But the actual record comes post-bind. And for me, from my experience, a lot of that data has already been populated in the underwriting platforms already because the carriers need that data to get a quote. Do you not feel that the CDR coming so late in the process is eroding its value somewhat?
Well, it's been a subject of debate longer than I've been with the program, from what I understand. The issue here is that the further you try to go towards the first interaction with the client in terms of data capture, the more complicated it gets, because every market participant, and I'm speaking more for the brokers, have a point of view about what they want to capture, when they want to capture it, how they're going to store it, et cetera. I think similar for the underwriters. So what we've tried to do is to say, well, what is necessary to create the technical account? So you have a contract in a system, have certainty around the data that's around that, and then be able to use that data for other things like paying claims. With that said, I think that's a fair question. And Rob Myers, who probably most of you know, who's at the LMA, is leading a group of people to understand how do we want to orchestrate the pre-bind data, and who's going to send it on to the gateway, and how's it going to actually happen pragmatically. I'll just give you one example of that. So if you have, I'll come back to syndicated business in a minute, but if you get syndicated business and say there's 3 underwriters, do you wait till all 3 of them are ready to place it before you bring it in? Do you bring it in one at a time? What's the responsibility of the broker vis-a-vis the underwriter? So that's a body of work that is underway now. I think it's actually probably the thorniest part of decisions that we have to make this summer in order to get it right. Ironically, though, a lot of the business is still singleton business. I think it's, depending on what line of business you look at, it's 50% of the marketplace. And then you look at business that may only have 2 syndicates, and it gets it to be even a higher percentage. So the other thing that I think we have to be mindful of is let's not try to build a system to handle the 10% of the outliers and put 90% of the submissions to the same process, because it just gets overcomplicated. So we're trying to take I think I may have said this before in February, more of an 80-20 rule, which is, what's the 80% that could be easily or more easily automated, and for the 20% that's more difficult, let's get to that in round
I think
two.
it's a great point. I've sat on many committees debating, trying to find that 20%, and I think the last one ran for 4 years. So I love the 80-20 rule. And personally, I can't wait to get hold of the CDR and start augmenting it and putting in different data sources and modeling it. I think it'll be super useful.
Everything that's been
Toby,
said.
what's your perspective?
For me, I think this is where actually, and for those of you kind of interested in the governance and the committees, where the LMG actually has a fantastic role to play. The LMG, for those who don't know so much, is the body that brings together all the trade associations, so LMA, IUA, LIBA, and also Lloyd. So it can speak for the market as opposed to a section of the market. That gives it a real strength. And for me, this is where actually the market does best, is where it sets standards. I think we can all take our own opinion about the building and deployment of various technical solutions to the market. And that's great and fine. And some get adopted better and some work a bit more better and so on and so forth. But the real answer here is about how we build better standards for our market, because that's what enables the interoperability between firms, the data exchange that we've talked about, the gateway that Bob mentioned. So those standards, we see a real opportunity to go further in time. The other point I'd make is you've got to start somewhere. We've all seen too many failed deliveries where we've been shooting for the stars and we won't stop until we get there, but we never quite do. For me, this, again, I'm really encouraged by the 80-20 approach, as we've just been talking about, yes, of course, we need to have vision for the future, but let's start somewhere, can we? Because otherwise, how are we going to move the market forward? So for me, CDR is a great start.
Yeah.
It's not the end, and I don't think anybody thinks it is, but it's a place to start. And of course, if you're going to start somewhere, you start with that technical account. You start with the translation of contract into data, because there's so much that can be done from there. Look, you're all right. The process and the who does what and where does it happen and where does the data get collected and how does quality get verified and those sorts of things. They're complex questions and they may take some time to resolve. But again, let's start somewhere and build out from there. I think for me, that's the key. The one final point I'd make about the CDR is really for the practitioners. The application of the CDR can come in many shapes and sizes. For example, one of the design pieces that we were looking at is, do we build it into our systems, which could be complex and expensive and take time? Or do we use it at our gateway as a universal translation engine and plug and play, so that all we have to do is talk to the outside world through CDR, we can then map it into our own internal systems. So I think the flexibility of the CDR also gives the market a lot to play with and a lot of opportunity to grab some of those benefits that we talked about.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and it's one of the questions that I'll go to now was around the pace, moving at the pace of the slowest, because not everybody in the market is going to be able to get budget in place, get the infrastructure in place, get the people in place to be able to move as fast as maybe some of the larger players. But that experimentation approach, maybe that those smaller deliveries are going to help those smaller firms get on board faster. Bob, I suppose the question for you is how's the central team going to manage to bring a whole market together on one roadmap and try and stick to your timelines?
Across the street from my office is St. Mary the Axe Church, so I light a lot of candles over there on a regular basis. This is a really, I'll try to give a brief answer because it's pretty complex question. First of all, if we go back to the comment I made about Joe Dainty's group, so Joe Dainty's creating a series of communities around readiness. So we're not trying to approach the market in terms of talking to the market as one size fits all. So there'll be a community around small brokers. There'll be a community around large brokers. Same thing on the managing agent side. And we're going to create another community around the tech providers, because I think it's also important that we get the tech providers to come along with us to the extent that we can get tech providers, and I'll just use a term that's stuck in my head. I'm not sure it's the term we'd actually use longer term, to be gateway compliant from a data standpoint. It just makes it easier, because if you're using a tech platform and they've already upgraded their systems, then you don't have to necessarily do all that upgrading yourself. So when we talk to the marketplace, we are going to talk to the marketplace in a more nuanced fashion, because we know that not everybody can go along the same speed. Secondly, the solutions, and it was mentioned earlier, that are being developed as part of the LMG Data Council is not one size fits all. So there'll be an opportunity for early adopters who may want to use APIs to send data directly to the gateway to be able to do that. For people who don't want to do it that way or are not ready to do it, the intention of the new IMRC, which has structured data in it, would suggest that if you use the new IMRC with the structured data fields, it can be ingested by the gateway as well. So there'll be more than one path to actually get data in there. And then importantly, just to reinforce something that we said earlier, there will be transition services provided. So it's not you got to flip the switch and everybody's got to be ready on a particular day. Now, with that said, and I'm pretty confident that this is the case, that at some point people will, in order to be, there'll be a tipping point in the marketplace. If I'm not digital ready, either as a cover holder, as a broker, or as an underwriter, and my competitor is, and they're getting faster throughput, more fulsome data so they can innovate, lower cost, that puts me in a position where I become less competitive than my peers. So my guess is that as this stuff gets traction, the normal forces of a competitive marketplace will take hold, and all of a sudden I'll say, gee, I got to do something different. So I think when you put all these things together, I've said this in other forums, I'd rather have stuff that's thoughtfully built and delivered so we can have an argument about adoption versus arguing about adoption readiness, and we don't have anything to actually adopt. So I think some of this is sequential, but I can promise you we'll spend a lot of time with market participants trying to understand your particular journey, not one journey for everybody.
Really good point. I like the idea of creating that fear of missing out in the market. Toby, a quick question with regards to the technical practicalities. Now, this market's built on vendors and service providers, and they're a fantastic array that have kept us running for so many years. How important is it working with your technology?
Oh, it is vital. I mean, I think as Bob mentioned, in the first instance, putting pressure on some of those tech providers to provide solutions that allow us to connect into some of the assets that we're seeing coming out of the Lloyd's programs. Because I think in the end, they're going to need to do, better that they do it once for the market than individually for each of their clients. And that's certainly the approach we hope they'll take. In some ways, it's a pro and a con, isn't it? We've got a relatively small number of tech providers providing policy admin to the market. That means that we know where they are and we can go around and say hi to them and put that pressure on, like we just mentioned. But also it means that we lack sometimes sort of variety and things like that. And especially given that we know that a lot of policy admin systems around the market have been in the market longer than I have, which at this stage is quite some achievement. So I think it's absolutely vital that we engage with the tech providers in a deep way. We work with them to understand, their response and our design. That it will be fit for purpose. I mentioned it earlier. This isn't just about the Future at Lloyd's program, although that's a huge part of this. It's also about placing platforms. It's also about being digital ready beyond that. But again, I think what gives me optimism in this space is the approach that's being taken, which is not a one size fits all, as we've just heard. Not once are we talking about Lloyd's and company market anymore. It's all the same. We're not, we're being much more thoughtful about the differences and the business models and the investment pools for smaller companies versus larger companies in the market. We recognise that we have a distribution chain which is both a strength, but sometimes can be a weakness in terms of the data exchange. So for me, Paul, it's not just about tech providers; it's about all providers. It's about business partners as well. I'm sure many firms, for example, are talking to their DCAs around data as well, and can they link with the firm on data in a better way. What we're seeing, and it's great to see, is brokers, cover holders, DCAs all coming to the table. I think that FOMO that you talk about in terms of missing out may come quicker than we think, because I'm already seeing a lot of movement in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's I just feel like we're kind of at the cusp at the moment, and it's kind of the wake up moment, and that's the conversations I'm having with a lot of my clients. Now, you don't have to just rush out and build a big team. As I said, there's some smaller experiments you can do here. There's a couple of questions in the chat, Bob, the logistical ones. So there was one around what date is the IMRC going for consultation? And Katie's kindly put a response into the chat for anybody that wants to get an answer to that. Bob, very quickly, is there an answer? Do you know the date?
Yeah, it's gonna go out in the July timeframe, and we're gonna give it ample time for people to have a consultation around it. I think as I said earlier, I think the issue won't be so much the IMRC consultation. I think that'll go relatively smoothly. The socialization around what I call who's going to do what in the marketplace around data flows and data placement is the one that's also underway, which is related to but not the same as the IMRC.
Second question for you. It's all about dates at the moment. When should the market expect the roadmap for the gateway/digital interaction?
So we have a roadmap developed for the gateway. It has not yet been released because we're just standing up the team, but I would imagine that we can start to show you what that looks like in the next 30 days. The high level roadmap has the gateway being delivered in full fashion about the same time as the market services are ready to handle the downstream processing. So that's late in 2023. It's about a 15 to 18 month build process.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that's wonderful. I think we'll leave you alone on dates for now. So final question, we've got a couple of minutes. As ever with London Market projects, and I've been involved in a few, it's big, it's fraught, there's complexity in politics. Why is it going to be different this time around? Toby, you first.
Two things for me. So one is that the wider world has moved beyond all recognition, and I think we need to acknowledge that in our marketplace. We talked about faster claims payments, for example, an expectation, no longer an option. We talk about client-rich data. You talked about it, Paul, in terms of your conversation. That's not going away. So our context has changed,
yep.
And I think that creates a driver. The other one I'm going to say is, look, our market's all about people, right? And if you've got the right people in the right roles and they've got the right outlook, it carries you forward. And I think that's why, every engagement we've had with the Future Lloyds team in recent times has been really positive and constructive. Nobody's pretending they've got all the answers, but they've got a commitment to find out and to engage with the market to do it. And I think that sort of approach, will go down really well in our market and provide a real opportunity to create those communities around the engagement and adoption that will help us move forward. In the end, it's all about the people, and I think we've got a great chance of taking the people with us on this one.
Yeah, passion, energy, enthusiasm, they're kind of the only things that get projects over the line, aren't they? Bob, finally, over to you.
Well, I agree with everything that was just said. I don't want to repeat it. I think the point around market forces causing people to need to change to be competitive. I made a comment the other day. I won't name the particular carrier, but somebody didn't want to do something for a particular cover holder in a syndicated fashion. I said, well, how would you feel if they just took the program down the street on Leadenhall to see one of the big insurers who was willing to do it? All of a sudden, it's, well, I don't want that to happen. So I think there is the fact that the larger market is moved from a data standpoint. The only other two or three things I would say is I completely agree with the people thing. This is only going to happen if we all sort of hang together and try to get it across the line and not be overly upset when something goes wrong, because something's going to go wrong several times between now and call it mid 2024. And then finally, there have been some big markers that have been decided. So we are funding a new tech build at the JV. There's a lot of money being spent on that. We do have a new contractual construct for how the JV is going to operate. We didn't have that last year. We have data standards that have been determined, and we talked about the IMRC and those other kind of things. So I think there is positive momentum. But I think if we are diligent about delivery and patient with adoption, we will get there. And I think it does come down to us hanging together as a marketplace to deliver.
I think that's a really important piece, isn't it? That this is always has been a collaborative marketplace, and we kind of need to stick together and deliver as one. Right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your very honest and transparent answers. Jeremy, I'll hand it back to you.
There we go. So that was just the final bit, the Q&A part of the session at Tintec. It's well worth going back to watch it, actually, just because it'll put it in context, a lot of what Bob was saying. But what I took away from just that clip is the kind of the almost the change in tone from Bob there. Very honest, concise answers, very clear in communicating. Open to say, hey, it's not all going to go right. You've got to bear with us. I think that's one thing. I think this area that we talk about on the show a lot, kind of a competitive marketplace, is the only way that change really happens. And we've already spoken about competition in the news. And I agree with him. I think that now the pace of change is so great that if you don't have those digital capabilities, then very soon you will be at a disadvantage. And so I think we will start to see traction around some of these initiatives. And Toby, as always, speaks brilliantly from the market perspective. So, it was really refreshing, I thought.
I thought it was good. That they are three good guys, aren't they? And they're very sensible and they're realistic. I think the change in tone and content is also around being commercial. They seem to be more, some of the examples they're using are more about what would be the benefits, which we've talked about before, to a business, or the threats, if you like. It doesn't really matter which way around you do it, but the FOMO idea is quite interesting. I personally think they've got to really, really ramp that up, because while it is a collaborative market, it's also a market that is siloed, has its own specific interests, and you can come up against some real difficult, intractable issues there. So it isn't that, I don't think they are saying this, but it's not a sort of happy clappy environment, I don't think. I think it is about finding very carefully what those competitive levers are and making sure that the technologies are supporting some people to get some first mover advantage, because that's the only way that really competition works. If everybody thinks this is going to be a level playing field and things, then it becomes dull, boring, and there's no real benefit. It's costly and it's tedious, etc. So I think that has to be the example that Bob uses, is that you could just lose business tomorrow if you don't get this right. I think those sort of things have to be proven. They have to be use cases. They have to start to show that perhaps is the case. Otherwise, I think technology just is always in the background. I think the other point I think that has been around for a while, but is more emphasised, is that point about the people and passion and interest and enthusiasm. It can be overplayed, but you need to link that into somehow this being less of a top-down command and control, which it has been in the past, and more of a sort of, look, let's all muck in together. We'll all learn. We'll all get on with things. We're moving away from these big transformations, which we've heard now quite often being said. So I think it's as much about some of the smaller things, because it seems like their technologists are quite confident about what can be done and what they could do with data. The 80-20 thing is now almost a mantra, isn't it? That we're not going to fix everything. And to some extent, you feel that is because the tech business, and I think Bart was saying this, is for so long we're just being asked to solve everything, and they can't. And now it's realistic that they can't, and everybody accepts that. It's taken quite a long time, I have to say, but anyway. So there's some opportunity. Yeah, it is good, and it seems like even when we come to things like dates or things are actually happening, which in the past we've always had a sort of bit of obfuscation about that sort of thing. About, well, you know, it's this and it, and there's no spin at all from Bob. I didn't think. I'll remember the fact that he's lighting candles in the church, praying for this to happen. That one comment probably says more about this program than anything else. but guess what? You know, that's what a lot of business is about, really. You've got to take a leap of faith and you've got to go for it. And if you don't, and you want it all to be just written in wiring diagrams, you don't get anywhere either.
No, indeed. So good. So thanks to Paul, Toby, and Bob for that Q&A. As I say, you can go onto our website and you can watch the whole thing whenever you like. Right, we've got a busy week next week, haven't we, Ben?
Oh yes.
Awards. Which slide would you like?
I don't mind.
Award short list.
Okay, so we're doing via Insurindex, the brand business. We are doing our awards. We're showcasing the London's Leading Underwriter Awards next week at the Gherkin. So that's next Wednesday in the evening. It's not what you might call a gala type dinner thing. It's a bit. It's a smaller event, but it's still quite big because it is. There's over 100 people there. And then we'll be publicising it all. But we felt we wanted to do a live event, partly because of the launch of Insurindex, and partly because this is a thing that gets a lot of attention, and it's about people. So actually, having been through what we've been through, it would be great to get some people, giving them some awards. And this, this is based on our survey. So we want to make the point that this is pucker in terms of its quality. We've drafted in one of the top MC presenters in the market to help us out.
No, you haven't.
I know we've got you. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. So there's me and you. We're doing a little bit of stuff on stage. Not too much. It's pretty quick and efficient. And then we move on to the awards. And we've got Caroline Wagstaff, who from the LMG is talking about talent, and we've got Frank Striedel, who's talking about talent, particularly from an underwriting perspective. He's head of global energy at Zurich. So it should be good. And these are the shortlisted people. And we'll do a 3, 2, 1, and there'll be winners. And they will be all available the day after and in subsequent weeks and the report.
Yeah. And there's
yes, so we've got two. So we've also just shown, because we will be doing some articles, will be going out in the Insurer in the week after. There's a week of articles about this. So this will showcase the leading teams or the leading bench strength by business in each of the classes of business. So these are the ones that are top 10s, but they're just in alphabetical order here. We won't say who the absolute leaders are here, but this is the kind of roll of honor of people who get all the mentions. So yeah, so it's a lot of players, a lot of coverage, a lot of individuals as well. So should be fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an event where you can present and you don't have to do any of the organisation.
Yeah, no, I just have to rock up.
Busman's holiday.
Yeah. I know what'll happen. I can't help myself. I'll get involved. But that's all good. Another pair of hands, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. You'll be putting microphones on and all sorts by the time we get there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Directing stuff.
You'll love it.
You don't have to do it like that. You do it like this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Super. Look forward to that. So, what are you doing this weekend, Ben? I assume that you'll be going to Glastonbury Festival and doing a Jarvis Cocker tribute act.
We'll go and sit in a traffic jam for 3 hours. No. I will be watching it though, because I always like a bit of Glasto. So I'll have a glass of wine tonight and watch that, among other things. So yes, not much quiet other than that, really. I've had a lot of work. I've got some things to finish off, so I'll prep myself for the onslaught next week. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I got a birthday party to organise for tomorrow. So, my son's birthday. So not entirely sure what we're doing, but I'm be ferrying around children. I'm pretty positive of that. I'll be doing a bit of that. Good.
Right, next week we shall give you the highlights from the awards as well as the news as always. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Right. Have a good weekend. Bye.